Welcome to MMT Chats. This episode is brought to you by ISCAR with new ideas for machining intelligently.
Hey, MMT followers, Christina Fuges with MoldMaking Technology, and my guest on today's MMT Chat is Nick Mitchell with Matsuura, USA. Nicholas, or Nick, is one of our 30 under 30 honorees in MoldMaking Technology. So hi, Nick.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. So first, I have to say congratulations. And how does it feel to not just be nominated, but you were also selected as one of our 30?
It feels great. I'm very honored to be a part of all of it. It's cool to look through and see all the different people in this industry that have so many different backgrounds, so many different jobs that they apply every day. So I'm lucky to be one of those that kind of brings a different approach and a different skill set into all of those different people working together.
I love it. So why don't you explain a little bit, what is your current position and what do you do every day?
Yeah, so I'm an applications engineer at Matsuura Machinery in the U.S. division, so out of St. Paul, Minnesota. I work on the Lumex additive manufacturing machine, so a hybrid machine that uses selective laser sintering as well as a 3-axis CNC spindle in the same build chamber. So we build parts up using the laser, and then we finish machine using the 3-axis CNC.
I remember the first time seeing that machine. I was out at a show called Euromold years ago, and the attention that machine got, it was like it was magic. It's like, what is that machine doing? And now, even MoldMaking Technology, we've covered a couple tool shops, mold builders that have invested in that technology. So it's an exciting space for you to be in, especially within the mold manufacturing community. So it's exciting, and I'm glad to have a connection like you now, because I'm sure there's plenty of other content and stories that you can help me tell through the pages of MoldMaking.
Yeah, it's very fun. It's a new technology, so to speak, for mold making, but I'm also new to the industry, or relatively new. So it's been cool to grow myself and the technology at the same time.
That's an interesting perspective to have with potential customers, right? You're kind of growing in with them.
Yeah, and I have a background in design, so a lot of designers are not quite sure how to design for this type of technology or this type of approach. So,
well, since you brought it up, why don't you give us a little snapshot? I'm trying to give the viewers who'll be watching this the variety of backgrounds all of you people, you young people, have come into this industry. So why don't you talk a little bit about your journey, growing up, what were you like, the education that you received and how you ended up at Matsuura?
Yeah, so I was one of those kids that took everything apart. And they didn't necessarily go back together very well all the time. So throughout high school, I wasn't really involved in much of the STEM stuff. I didn't take a bunch of those classes. But after I graduated high school, I kept taking stuff apart, and it started to go back together. Okay, so I went to school for an associate's degree in engineering drafting, and that was almost 4 years ago now.
Okay.
And then liked what I was doing. I actually started as an intern here at Matsuura. So I was working with kind of on the design side, but also on the manufacturing side, getting a lot more of a view into what's involved. So with that, I decided to go back to school and get my bachelor's in industrial engineering to kind of round out the design and technology side and the actual physical manufacturing side of things, so that I could take both of those into integrating a machine tool and into a machine shop, and knowing the design side, but also knowing the implementation of it.
Yeah, that's a powerful combination.
Yeah, it's been fun to learn about.
Yeah. So you've been at it for a while. Did you come into manufacturing, and specifically mold manufacturing, if you can speak to that? Did you have some preconceived notions that once you've been in it for a while, you've discovered that, wow, I was totally wrong. It's not like that at all?
Yeah, the biggest thing for me has been mold making, as I was introduced to it, was very concrete and established, right? Okay. So there was a definite way of doing things, and the overall consensus was that things don't change much. But the fun part for me has been learning and seeing that things change every single day, and you can take a new technology, or you can take a new approach and achieve the same or better results, sometimes faster, sometimes it's slower at first, but it improves. So that the idea that the mold making as a whole was defined and kind of set where it was, was really not true once I was able to dive into it.
I love that, because and I think this is kind of what you're saying too. It's considered a very traditional marketplace, right? So it can come to people's thinking. That seasoned professional could be looked at as someone that's just going to go about doing the way they've always done things, and that they're a little resistant to change. So I think that's a combination of kind of what you're saying, where having this next generation come in and kind of push them along and show them, gosh, for this industry to really grow and attract that next gen, like, you have to look at new ways and think things differently. And additive is just one way. And I do think that I agree with you. The industry has that, people perceive it that way, but even me covering it for over 20 years, they've made a lot of advancements, like, on their own. Like, they know when things have to change. There's always those individuals that are not going to want to, but that's in any industry. So I kind of get you there. So far, what has been your number one challenge on the job?
My number one challenge is, well, from a personal perspective, in day-to-day work, is designing for additive manufacturing. So more in general than just related to mold making. There are things that you can do with additive manufacturing that until you mess with them and experience it, it seems like you can't really do it. So the hardest part and the most enjoyable part at the same time has been, you start out with a plastic 3D printer or something, and then you kind of realize, oh, hey, I can pull this stuff off. I can do it differently this way. But changing your mindset to understand that is a hard barrier to get across sometimes.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty much the opposite, right? Like, mold making is known as this subtractive, right? And Matsuura is in that business too. So it's subtractive, and then you have additive. So it's turning it on its head. But I think that's a great industry for that. They're constantly figuring things out. It's just yet one other thing to figure out. And once you do, you're in a position to share that with other people. And I think that's great that you have the technology right in front of you to play around with.
Yeah, and a great example of that is conformal cooling. It's insane to think about. It doesn't make a lot of sense most of the time, but it helps so much that you have to dive into it and really investigate what you can do.
Exactly. And not only it helps your mold building customers help their customers, right? The tools they build. Yeah, it's important. Yep. So what is, out of everything you do, what's the most interesting aspect of the job?
I would say the idea overall of sintering, shooting something with a laser, melting metal into shapes, and how the metal reacts, how different power parameters change everything from one part to another. It's something that I really didn't understand from the beginning, but as I've learned to, you get a crash course in metallurgy, you get a crash course in energy and everything that goes along with it, that it's fun to take all of those variables, lay them out on a table and say, this one works, this one doesn't, this one is okay. It's very fun. That's pretty cool.
What is there a particular project that Matsuura has had you work on that you found the most interesting? And what was your role on that project?
Yeah, I would say the most interesting was a piece for a aerospace company that had a lot of features that were, they came to us and they said, hey, we want to build this. we know you have a additive machine that we think would do well. And we said, absolutely no way. That can't be built. And over, the course of about 6 months, we went back to the customer and said, hey, can we tweak this? And they said, no, but you can tweak that. And we made a feasible part by the end of it. And it was really cool to be a part of, and also, be proven wrong. We said no, and they said, okay, well, let's try.
Let's do it. How long was it from that beginning of that project till coming up with that feasible part? Do you remember?
It was about 4 months of kind of R&D and lobbying back and forth between them, so to speak.
Yeah.
But overall, the project took about 6 months, and it was a long process, but it was a fun process.
Yeah, it's a lot of learning. So with that in mind, one of the big terms with this next generation and the seasoned generation is the term mentoring. And everybody kind of defines that a little bit differently. So what does that mean to you, Nick, when you think of somebody mentoring you or you mentoring somebody else? How do you define that?
I would say the biggest idea is that I have a coworker that I work closely with every day. He has forgotten more than I know. And
that's a good one.
I think that the important takeaway is that the information is there, and people are willing to share it with you. And if you take the time to really understand and really focus with them, you're going to take away their experience from your own perspective, and they're willing to give it. So you need to be willing to give it to somebody else. So the kind of the channel of information is always running through the whole company, but everybody can take their own little bits from it. So put it all out there, and somebody will grab something from it
and share. So how does that look at Matsuura? Is there a formal mentoring going on, a formal arrangement, or is it informal?
It's informal. However, I started out as an intern and was lucky enough to work with the team I work with now before I was full time. And so the internship side of things was definitely set up as close to a formal mentorship as it could be.
Okay.
But in an informal setting where you can make mistakes, you can go back to them and say, hey, this didn't go well.
That is a big deal. The environment, that culture has to almost promote mistakes, because that's the only way you're going to learn. You don't want somebody to be intimidated to try something, right? Or apply something that they already know if they're going to be afraid they're going to get in trouble. Or
hey, I did this, and my mentor said, oh, you're wrong.
Yeah.
You
exactly.
Never want that. So I think it was good to have, more of an informal mentorship, so that you do have those free channels of communication.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So looking forward, what do you think is the number one skill set or just characteristic of someone that might want to come into this world of mold manufacturing? What do you think that is? What's the number one skill set you recommend that they have, or you think they need to survive it?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me, and the biggest thing that I've seen, is I went to Dunwoody College, and they start us out on the shop floor, with a hand crank mill and a not a hand lathe, but not a CNC lathe.
Oh, yes, manual. Yep.
Yeah, manual lathe. So the ability to kind of understand how you're cutting metal, or you're changing something about the part, you need to be able to feel that to understand, when you do move to a CNC machine, you say, oh, I have that ear from when I could feel the mill moving or taking chips too deep or something like that.
Right.
You say, hey, I have that skill set. I understand what's actually happening, and you can adjust from there. So the biggest thing for me was understanding kind of from a ground level how
the basics
metal works.
Yeah,
exactly.
You need the base. So you need that traditional mindset, right, to know where the industry is going. You need to know where it's come from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So if to attract more next generation, is there something in particular about the industry overall that has to change to get these kids, whether they're middle school or high school or people at colleges, to make them enter this marketplace? What do you think has to change?
I think that we need to get software in front of kids sooner. I think that from my perspective, I didn't know what SolidWorks was. I walked into my first day of college and they handed me a computer with it preloaded on it, and I said, okay, I'll figure this out. Took the classes, did all that. But you know, had I been exposed to it more in high school, exposed to it more even before high school, it really would have, I think, energized my enthusiasm behind going into that career field, but also given me a leg up to start with.
I have not heard that yet. And that seems almost common sense, because that younger generation has grown up with devices and software related tools, you know, out of the womb. So why not incorporate that into middle school and high school? The actual software that is being used in manufacturing. That's a really good point. All right, here's a tough one, or maybe not. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I would like to do more in the kind of overall with the industrial engineering side of my degree. So right now I get to do a lot of design work. I get to do a lot of machine work, but I'd also like to take all these new machines that are out there and I'd like to figure out how they work in a factory together.
Oh, that's good. I like that one. All right. Last but not least, if I was to ask you what your sales pitch is to sell mold making, or what you do, to a kid in high school, what would be your sales pitch?
That's a tough one. I think the biggest thing for me is that, you know, everybody always says, do something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. A lot of people are really fortunate to do that. A lot of people don't even know what that is, though. So for me, it kind of, you know, it started out with 3D printers. You know, I had a little bit of interest. I had a little bit of kind of a bug for it, but I never really played around with them. But I figured out a way to find something that I was passionate about and make that into a career. So I think just even if you don't know what you love or you don't know what you want to do, start out with something and it will come to you.
I love it. I like how you're taking that cliche, right? People say that all the time, and you've actually done that. I mean, so it is possible. You're a living proof of that. I love it. All right. Well, thank you, Nick. I appreciate your time today. I want to say congrats one more time, and continue. Hopefully we stay in touch as you advance. I think I'm very hopeful and excited about this next generation coming into this field. I think there's a lot of good that's going to come out of it and just kind of re-energizes the industry. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And for all those watching out there, for everything mold making, visit moldmakingtechnology.com. Stay safe and healthy, and more importantly, stay informed and stay inspired.